What if I told you that one of the biggest reasons most people never become successful is because they're trying too hard to be original? That sounds ridiculous. After all, we're constantly told the opposite. Schools reward originality. Businesses celebrate innovation. Society praises people who think differently. And from a young age, we're taught that copying is something to avoid. In school, copying is called cheating. In business, it's called lacking creativity. And in life, it's often seen as a sign of weakness. But what if that's completely backwards? What if some of the richest people in history became successful not because they were original, but because they were exceptional copycats? Imagine two people starting a business tomorrow. The first person spends months trying to invent something completely new. The second person finds someone already winning and copies everything they can. Most people assume the first person will succeed, but in reality, the second person often wins. Because success leaves clues. And this is where our story begins. In 1994, an engineer was sitting alone in Heathrow Airport waiting for a flight. Most people spend their entire lives chasing something that sounds incredibly valuable. Originality. The original business. The original idea. The original strategy. The original path. Because from the moment we're children, we're taught that originality is the highest form of intelligence. And it makes sense. In school, copying is cheating. If you copy someone's answers, you fail. If you create your own answers, you succeed. Over time, a powerful belief begins to form. Success belongs to the people who invent, not the people who imitate. At least, that's what we're told. The problem? Real life doesn't work like school, and nowhere is that more obvious than in business. Because if originality was truly the secret to success, many of the wealthiest people in history should have failed. Take Warren Buffett. Most people imagine Buffett as a financial genius who invented a revolutionary investing strategy. But that's not what happened. For years, Buffett obsessed over one man, Benjamin Graham. He read everything Graham wrote, studied every investment, analyzed every decision. He wasn't trying to become Warren Buffett. He was trying to become the best Benjamin Graham student on earth. And that's a huge difference. Years later, another man would discover exactly the same principle. His name was Mohnish Pabrai, and his story starts in an airport. But before we get there, let's talk about Sam Walton, because Walton may have been the greatest copycat in business history. Long before Walmart became the largest retailer on earth, Walton had an unusual habit. Whenever he entered a competitor's store, he brought a notebook. He wasn't looking for reasons they were wrong, he was looking for reasons they were right. Employees later described Walton kneeling on store floors, measuring shelf spacing with a tape measure. Imagine that. The future billionaire crawling around a competitor's store. Most people would call that copying. Walton called it research, and that mindset changed everything. And once you start looking for it, you see the same pattern everywhere. Buffett, Walton, Disney, Apple, McDonald's. The biggest winners weren't obsessed with being different. They were obsessed with finding what already worked, then making it better. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If copying works so well, why do most people refuse to do it? The answer has nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with ego. And that's where our story really begins. In 1994, Mohnish Pabrai was sitting alone in Heathrow Airport. Outside, rain tapped softly against the terminal windows. Inside, hundreds of travelers rushed past him. Businessmen, families, tourists. Everyone seemed to be heading somewhere important. But Mohnish wasn't thinking about flights. He was thinking about his future. At the time, he wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, and he certainly wasn't one of the world's greatest investors. In fact, almost nobody had ever heard his name. Like millions of ambitious people, Mohnish had a simple dream. He wanted financial freedom. Not just money, Freedom. The freedom to choose how he spent his time. The freedom to work because he wanted to, not because he had to. But there was one problem. He had no idea how to get there. And that's where most people get stuck. They know where they want to go, but they have no map. So they start guessing, trying random strategies, following trends, jumping from one opportunity to the next, hoping something works. What Monish discovered that day would completely change the way he thought about success. But first, he had to stumble across a simple idea. An idea so obvious that most people ignore it. While waiting for his flight, Monish picked up a book. Inside that book was the story of a man named Warren Buffett. By then, Buffett was already becoming legendary. Year after year, decade after decade, he kept producing extraordinary investment returns. Returns that most professional investors couldn't even dream of matching. And the more Monish read, the more confused he became. Because Buffett wasn't doing anything complicated. No secret formulas, no magic indicators, no hidden insider system. Just a handful of simple principles repeated over and over again. That's when a question appeared in his mind. A question that would eventually make him hundreds of millions of dollars. What if I don't need to invent my own strategy? What if Buffett already figured it out? Most people would have kept reading. Monish couldn't stop thinking. Because if Buffett had spent decades solving the investing puzzle, why start from zero? Why spend years making mistakes Buffett already made? Why not simply learn from the best? At first, the idea felt almost wrong. Too simple, too obvious, almost like cheating. And that's exactly why most people reject it. Because success is supposed to be complicated, isn't it? Think about it. Imagine you're standing at the base of Mount Everest. Next to you stands a guide who has climbed the mountain 100 times. He knows every dangerous path, every shortcut, every mistake. Would you ignore him? Would you proudly announce, "No thanks, I'll figure it out myself"? Of course not. Yet that's exactly what people do in business every day. They ignore proven paths. They ignore successful people. They ignore evidence. And then they wonder why progress feels so difficult. Monish made a different decision. Instead of trying to become the next investing genius, he decided to become the best Buffett student he could possibly be. That single decision changed everything. Years later, Monish would build a fortune worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Not by inventing a new investing philosophy, not by creating a revolutionary system, but by following one simple principle. Find what works, study it, copy it, improve it. And once you see that principle, you start noticing it everywhere. Walmart, Disney, McDonald's, Apple, different industries, different eras, different people. Same pattern. The question is, if the evidence is so overwhelming, why does almost nobody follow it? The answer has nothing to do with intelligence, nothing to do with talent, and nothing to do with opportunity. The real reason is far more dangerous. It's ego. And that's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because the greatest obstacle to success isn't ignorance. It's the belief that you're smarter than the people who already succeeded. And that belief has quietly destroyed more fortunes than any market crash ever could. If success leaves clues, and successful people leave blueprints, then why don't more people follow them? It's a simple question, but the answer is deeply uncomfortable. Because the real obstacle isn't information. It's ego. Most people assume ego looks like arrogance, someone bragging, someone showing off, someone acting superior. But that's not how ego usually appears. In fact, ego often disguises itself as independence. Ego whispers things that sound intelligent. I want to do it my way. I don't want to copy. I want to be unique. I'll figure it out myself. Sounds admirable until you look at the results. Imagine a young entrepreneur. He discovers a business generating $100 million a year. The model is public. The strategy is visible. The customers are obvious. Yet instead of studying it, he ignores it. Why? Because copying feels uncomfortable. Copying feels ordinary. Copying doesn't make us feel special. And that's the trap. Psychologists call this the uniqueness bias, the tendency to overvalue our own ideas simply because they're ours, even when better ideas already exist. The irony is almost painful. The people who most want success often reject the very evidence that could help them achieve it, because deep down, they want the success to be theirs, not borrowed. And nowhere is this more visible than on YouTube. Every day, thousands of creators start channels. Most never grow. Not because they lack talent, but because they refuse to study what already works. A creator discovers a channel with 5 million subscribers. The titles work, the thumbnails work, the storytelling works, the pacing works, the audience loves it. Yet instead of learning from it, they try to reinvent everything. New format, new structure, new thumbnail style, new storytelling approach. Then 6 months later, they wonder why nobody is watching. The market had already given them the answers. They simply didn't want to hear them because the answer felt too simple. Study what works, then do more of it. This doesn't mean copying forever. That's the misunderstanding. Buffett didn't become Graham, Pabrai didn't become Buffett, and Apple didn't become Xerox. They started by learning, then they evolved. Every master follows the same sequence: observe, copy, understand, improve, innovate. Not the other way around. The ego wants innovation first. Reality demands understanding first. And the people who understand this distinction gain an enormous advantage. Which brings us to one of the greatest business empires ever built. A company that mastered this principle better than almost anyone: Walmart. And what Sam Walton did next reveals something extraordinary, because Walton wasn't just copying competitors, he was creating a system for learning faster than everyone else. And that system would eventually make him one of the richest men in history. In the 1960s, while most retailers were busy trying to outsmart each other, Sam Walton was doing something almost embarrassing. He was taking notes. Lots of notes. Whenever Walton visited a new town, he would walk into competing stores. Not to buy anything, not to criticize them, to learn. Most business owners walked into a store and saw products. Walton saw information. Every shelf was data. Every price tag was a lesson. Every display was an experiment. He studied everything: store layouts, product placement, customer behavior, pricing strategies, checkout speed. Nothing was too small. Former employees later described something extraordinary. Walton would sometimes kneel on store floors, tape measure in hand, measuring the distance between shelves. Imagine that, the future billionaire crawling around a competitor's supermarket. Most people would be too proud. Walton wasn't. Because Walton understood something most entrepreneurs never do. Success leaves clues. And clues are useless if your ego refuses to see them. The fascinating part? Walton never claimed to be a genius. In fact, he openly admitted he borrowed ideas. Constantly. Whenever he discovered a better system, he copied it. Whenever he saw a better process, he copied it. Whenever he found a better idea, he copied it. But here's where most people misunderstand the lesson. Walton wasn't copying to stay average. He was copying to understand. Because once you truly understand why something works, you gain the ability to improve it. And that's exactly what Walton did. Over time, thousands of tiny observations started to compound. A better shelf layout here, a smarter pricing system there, a faster checkout process somewhere else. Individually, none of these changes looked revolutionary. Together, they created one of the most powerful business machines in history. And this is where many people make a costly mistake. They spend years searching for one massive breakthrough, one genius idea, one magical shortcut, while successful people quietly collect hundreds of small advantages. That's why Walton eventually built Walmart, not through a single brilliant insight, but through relentless observation, relentless learning, relentless copying. And once you see Walton's strategy, another question immediately appears. If copying works so well, why do we keep worshiping originality? To answer that, we need to look at one of the most creative companies ever built, a company people praise for innovation, yet its greatest success came from studying others first: Disney. Because the story most people believe about creativity isn't true, and Walt Disney may be the perfect example. When people think about creativity, they often imagine Walt Disney. After all, Disney built one of the most beloved entertainment companies in history. Millions of people see him as the definition of originality. But here's the surprising part. Disney wasn't obsessed with being original. He was obsessed with learning. And there is a huge difference. Long before Disney became Disney, animation already existed. Cartoons already existed. Storytelling already existed. Audiences already loved animated characters. Disney didn't invent animation. He studied it obsessively. He analyzed what audiences loved, what they ignored, what made them laugh, what made them care. And then he did something most people overlook. He improved the experience. Not by changing everything, by improving key parts. Better storytelling, better characters, better emotions, better production quality. The fundamentals remained. The execution improved. This pattern appears throughout history. People celebrate the final innovation, but they rarely notice the years spent studying what came before it. Think about musicians, writers, athletes, filmmakers. Before they create something remarkable, they spend years copying masters. Not because they lack creativity, because imitation is how understanding is built, and understanding is what eventually creates innovation. Disney understood this better than most. Every successful story taught him something. Every audience reaction taught him something. Every competitor taught him something. While others chased originality, Disney chased insight. And insight turned out to be far more valuable. This is where many ambitious people get trapped. They want to skip the learning phase. They want innovation immediately, without first building understanding. But creativity without understanding often creates confusion. Understanding without creativity creates imitation. The magic happens when both meet. And that's exactly what Disney mastered. Learn first, improve second, innovate third. Which brings us to another company people completely misunderstand. A company often described as revolutionary, a company associated with innovation, a company worth trillions of dollars. Because Apple didn't become successful by inventing everything. In fact, one of Apple's greatest strengths was identifying what already worked and making it dramatically better. And once you understand what Steve Jobs really did, you start seeing the same hidden pattern everywhere, including in products you use every single day. Because Apple may be the most misunderstood success story of all, and the lesson hidden inside that story could completely change how you think about innovation. If there's one company people associate with innovation, it's Apple. The iPhone, the iPod, the iPad, products that changed entire industries, products that transformed everyday life, products that made Apple one of the most valuable companies on Earth. And because of that, many people assume Apple invented everything. But that's not what happened, not even close. The iPod wasn't the first MP3 player. The iPhone wasn't the first smartphone. The iPad wasn't the first tablet. In fact, all of these categories already existed. The problem wasn't invention. The problem was execution. Most products were confusing, clunky, complicated, frustrating. Steve Jobs saw something most people missed. He wasn't asking, what can we invent? He was asking, what already exists that could be dramatically improved? That's a very different question. One starts with ego, the other starts with observation, and observation almost always wins. Apple studied existing products, studied existing markets, studied existing customer frustrations. Then they simplified, refined, improved. And that's why the lesson of Apple is so powerful. Because Apple proves that copying and innovation are not opposites. They're partners. The best innovation is often built on top of deep understanding. The same pattern appeared with Buffett. The same pattern appeared with Pabrai. The same pattern appeared with Walton. The same pattern appeared with Disney. And now, Apple. different industries, different decades, different personalities, yet somehow the same hidden rule keeps appearing. Which raises a fascinating question. If all these successful people followed the same pattern, why do smart people keep ignoring it? Because intelligence can become a trap. And that's where things become truly interesting. Because some of the smartest people in the world never become wealthy. Not because they lack knowledge, but because they misunderstand how success actually works. And that's where our next lesson begins. Because being smart can help you learn faster, but it can also convince you that you don't need to learn from anyone else. And that mistake has cost countless intelligent people their future. Here's something that sounds completely backwards. Some of the smartest people in the world never become successful. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they rely on it too much. We've all met people like this. Brilliant students, exceptional thinkers, people who always seemed destined for greatness. Yet years later, their lives look surprisingly ordinary. Meanwhile, someone less intelligent, less educated, less impressive on paper, builds a business, creates wealth, and completely changes their life. Why does this happen? Because intelligence can create a dangerous illusion. The illusion that understanding something is the same as doing it. Smart people often fall in love with ideas. Successful people fall in love with execution. And those are very different things. The intelligent mind wants to optimize, improve, reinvent, challenge assumptions, which sounds useful and often is, but there's a problem. Optimization before understanding usually creates confusion. You can't improve a system you haven't mastered. Think about Buffett. He didn't start by reinventing investing. He mastered Graham first, then evolved. Think about Pabrai. He didn't start by creating a new philosophy. He started by studying Buffett. Think about Walton. He didn't begin with genius ideas. He began with observation. Think about Disney. Think about Apple. Different industries, same pattern. Mastery first, innovation later. Which brings us to the hidden rule that connects every story you've heard today. A rule so simple, most people overlook it. And yet, it may be the closest thing success has to a formula. Because the biggest mistake isn't copying too much. It's trying to innovate before you've earned the right to. And once you understand that, everything changes. Throughout this entire video, we've been looking at different people, different industries, different time periods, different success stories. Yet somehow, the same pattern kept appearing. At first, it looked like coincidence. Then it started looking like evidence. And now, it looks like a rule. Not a guaranteed formula, not a magic shortcut, not a secret hidden by billionaires. A pattern. A pattern that appears again and again throughout history. And once you understand this pattern, you start seeing why so many people struggle. Because most people approach success backwards. They start here. Innovation. The final step. The step everyone celebrates. The step everyone notices. But innovation was never the beginning. It was always the reward, the result, the final chapter. The real process looks very different. It begins with observation. Observe, study what works, study winners, study systems, study reality, not opinions, reality. Then comes the step most people resist, copy. Not because copying is glamorous, not because it's creative, but because copying is one of the fastest ways to transfer knowledge. Then comes understanding, and this is where the transformation happens. Because once you understand why something works, you are no longer copying, you're learning. And once understanding appears, improvement becomes possible. Now you can adapt, refine, optimize, personalize, make it your own. And only then does innovation appear. Observe, copy, understand, improve, innovate. 5 simple steps, hidden inside every story we've discussed. Buffett followed it, Pabrai followed it, Walton followed it, Disney followed it, Apple followed it. And once you recognize the pattern, you stop asking, how can I be different? And start asking, what already works? Because success rarely belongs to the person who starts from nothing. Success belongs to the person who learns the fastest. And learning begins with humility. And that brings us back to an airport, a rainy afternoon, and a man who accidentally discovered one of the most valuable lessons of his life. Back in 1994, Monish Pabrai was sitting alone in Heathrow Airport. At the time, he had no idea that a simple decision would eventually change his life. He wasn't looking for a secret. He wasn't looking for a shortcut. He was simply looking for answers. What he discovered wasn't complicated. In fact, that was the problem. Most people ignore simple ideas because simple ideas don't feel powerful. But over and over again, history tells the same story. Not just with Pabrai, with Buffett, with Walton, with Disney, with Apple. Different industries, different generations, different personalities. Yet somehow, they all discovered the same truth. Success leaves clues. The tragedy is that most people never follow them. Not because they can't see them, because their ego gets there first. The ego wants to be original. The ego wants to be different. The ego wants to prove itself. But reality doesn't reward originality. Reality rewards value. And value usually comes from understanding, not invention, not genius, not talent. Understanding. That's why the hidden rule isn't be different. The hidden rule is understand first. Different comes later. Somewhere right now, someone is spending years trying to invent something completely new, trying to be original, trying to be unique, trying to stand out. And somewhere else, another person is quietly studying what already works, learning, observing, improving, building. 10 years from now, one of them may be called a genius, but the truth is far less exciting. They simply learned faster. Because the greatest opportunities in life are rarely hidden. Most of them are visible. They're simply ignored. And maybe that's the real lesson. Success isn't about discovering secrets nobody knows. It's about recognizing truths most people overlook. Observe, copy, understand, improve, innovate. 5 steps, 1 pattern, a lifetime of results. The question isn't whether success leaves clues. It does. The question is, are you humble enough to follow them? Because the people we call geniuses often started as students.